Awesome. Great, thank you everyone. Nau mai haere mai to the guests that we have in council chambers today for this session on some land in Waikanae, the east part of Waikanae, and we'll be hearing from Anna and the team at Land Matters, and also understanding that we have some of the landowners in the room today as well, so welcome to council chambers. Just to briefly introduce who we have in the room, so I'm Sophie, I'm the Paikakiriki-Raumati ward councillor, and the mayor just kind of swiftly passed over chairing the afternoon's briefings to me, but we've got the mayor in the room, Mayor Holborough, we've got Councillor Spires, Councillor Coford, Councillor Pravanov and Councillor Halliday, and Councillor Wilson will be joining us in the next 10 or 15 minutes, and Councillor Coe is sending her apologies, she's had to take her cat to the vet, but we have a pretty strong cohort of councillors here today, so that's just who's in the room, but probably enough from me. I think the purpose of this afternoon session, which we've got 1 hour kind of assigned for, is predominantly to hear from Anna as a result of the submission and through the long-term plan, and some thoughts around a potential private plan change. So we'll pass to you and stick to 30 minutes for sort of the presentation side of things, and then save 30 minutes for questions at the end. So councillors, if you have any questions, push your light on to get them all queued, and then we'll come to you after the presentation. Thanks, Anna. Sorry, if you could just press the button on the right-hand side of the microphone. Yeah, perfect.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting us here today to brief council on a private plan change proposal for the Greenfield site located over the railway line off Elizabeth Street that we describe as Waikanae East. Probably should describe it as Waikanae East Greenfield. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, Sam. I'd like to introduce our team. I'm Anna Carter, Principal Planner for Land Matters, and I've been working with the landowners of Waikanae East since preparing evidence on Council's intensification planning instrument, the IPI, which was done through Plan Change 2. And joining me today is Sam Pritchard, one of the directors of Land Matters. Land Matters has been supporting the landowners to work with Council on securing a process by which residential development could be realised since the decision on PC2 was issued last year, which declined to include this land for rezoning on the basis that it was of such a size that would warrant a Schedule 1 and a structure plan process. And Dr. Frank Boffa, who is here today, will be briefing councillors on the conceptual spatial plans that he's prepared. Along with Harriet Fraser, who's the transport engineer, they both prepared evidence to support the rezoning of this land through the IPI. Mrs. Fraser is unfortunately unable to make it today, but she will be available to respond to any questions you might have. So if we want to collate those questions, and I can send them to her. Dr. Boffa is going to be speaking after me. And we're here representing all 12 landowners of Waikanae East, and we have a number of them present today. If you'd like to introduce yourself, maybe starting with you, Brett. So I think we might have to press our red buttons.
No, that's okay. They were quick intros. So if you could maybe just in case there is anyone listening online, they won't be able to hear us otherwise. So
Brett Percival.
Oh, sorry. Now we've got all confused. So your light has to be red that indicates it's on. So we'll start.
Just say name of the
Yeah, we've pushed it too many times, I think.
So,
all right.
The landowners are here.
Yep.
actually, I can make it simple for those who are online. I have actually put little asterisks next to the landowners on this slide. You can see behind me. Sam, if you could just go to the next slide, thanks. Why we're here today. We've been invited here today following the landowners' submission on Council's long-term plan to brief councillors on our proposal, which is seeking Council facilitate a process for the land described as Waikanae East to enable residential development, and to facilitate an agreement between the parties, such as a memorandum of understanding that supports that process. and also to highlight the need for a wider Waikanae East transportation feasibility study to investigate future roading connections from Waikanae East over the railway line to support both the existing and proposed urban development of this area. So I've been advised that you all should have access to a package of information on your council hub space, or whatever you call it, which includes mine and Dr. Boffa's and Ms Fraser's evidence on Plan Change 2, and also Dr. Boffa's conceptual spatial plans, a copy of our submission on the long-term plan, and a copy of the draft or template memorandum of understanding. So if you don't have that, let me know, but I'm sure Anna has been able to provide that for you. And I can answer questions on this and any other information we have collated at the end of Dr. Boffa's briefing. Urban development of the land at Waikanae East has been given a green light through various documents, green light as in given a promising future. On 4th of July this year, Chris Bishop, the Minister of Housing, announced new housing growth targets for all Tier 1 and Tier 2 councils to live zone feasible development to provide for at least 30 years of housing demand. This announcement also sought to require centres expand outwards at the urban fringe and be responsive to private plan change proposals that would provide, quote, significant development capacity and contribute to a well-functioning urban environment. Now, the Minister's just announced in the last week that they'll be introducing a bill this year for those growth targets and other amendments to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and to the RMA, and for these to become law in 2025. So we see support of this plan change would be a proactive response to this legislation. In October 2021, going back a bit, Boffa Miskell prepared the Kapiti Coast Urban Development Greenfield Areas Report and the Urban Intensification Reports that informed KCDC's Te Tupe Pai, which is your Growing Well strategy. And this strategy, which was adopted by Council, identified Waikanae East land holdings, shown in green up behind me, as WAO4, and they identified it as a high priority for urban development that could support up to 480 dwellings. This was without applying the medium density residential standards. So WAO4 held a high approval rating in Boffa's report of 2A for positive outcomes, which only Paraparaumu Beach Town Centre and the Raumati South Local Centre was assessed to have better overall ratings. In June last year, 2023, the Independent Hearing Panel on Plan Change 2 released its recommendations, and while it did not accept the rezoning proposal put forward by the landowners for Waikanae East, for the reasons I've already given, they commended Dr. Boffa's conceptual spatial plans as, and I quote, "It is the type of intensification next to a strategic transport hub that is likely to secure the best urban outcomes for the community." 19th of March this year, the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee released the Future Development Strategy 2024. They call it the FDS. This is a document that is required to be prepared by every Tier 1 and 2 local authority under the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. And it sets out how it will achieve well-functioning urban environments in its existing and future urban areas, and how they will provide at least sufficient development capacity over the next 30 years to meet expected demand and to assist in the integration of planning decisions with infrastructure planning and funding. So the FDS identifies areas around the Waikanae train station as a priority for intensification, and it also identifies greenfield areas that are connected to existing urban areas. So Waikanae East is well placed to give effect to the housing and development outcomes sought at a local, regional and national level. This site, which is 40.7 hectares, is held in 12 land holdings, and it's currently zoned, actually it's got two zonings, so that's slightly incorrect. It's zoned rural production zone, and there's obviously some industrial zoned land in there as well. You can see it highlighted in white in the image on this slide, and it is located within the urban area or urban limit of Waikanae, if you'd like to call it that. It's within a walkable catchment to the Waikanae Transport Hub. And my evidence to the Plan Change 2 hearing identified that the site, based on Dr. Boffa's structure plan areas for residential development, could accommodate somewhere between 613 to 1,785 new dwellings over the next 30 years. This number being based on a rate of 80 dwellings per hectare for high density and 16 dwellings per hectare for the general residential zone. It could be somewhere lower than that for high density, just depending on what the market ends up deciding that would likely look like. Boffa-Miskell's assessment identified only low to moderate degree of constraints across the site. The Ohario Fault passes through the southern end of the site, which can be addressed through existing provisions in the district plan. And there's only localised stormwater ponding that is generated from a number of localised drains discharging into the Waikanae River. Dr. Boffa's plans have identified sufficient land to attenuate stormwater, and the Goodman site already contains a large constructed wetland designed specifically for stormwater treatment, and you can actually see that on the very first slide. Outside of the Waikanae River, there are no other protected landscape features within this area, and the site would meet the definition of being infrastructure ready in that potable water and wastewater surfaces are available with capacity to serve the development on the site. And this was identified and acknowledged in Boffa-Miskell's report for Te Tupe Pai. So Dr. Boffa, Frank, was engaged by the landowners to prepare conceptual spatial plans to support their submission on Plan Change 2. And in those plans, Dr. Boffa, which Frank's going to speak to next, identified 11.2 hectares of land suitable for high density housing. So that is sort of up to 4 stories. And that is land within 800 metres walkable distance of the train station. And it's shown in red on his plans. And a further 11.28 hectares of land for low to medium density housing, which is sort of between 2 to 3 stories, and that's shown in yellow on Frank's plans. He also identified rural zoning to act as a buffer along the river and a buffer to the Waikanae water treatment plant, and provided for Goodmans to continue operating out of this site in the short to medium term, and proposed a land swap of non-industrial zoned land for industrial zoned land located along the railway corridor, and also identified multiple options of access into and through the site. Harriet Fraser, who unfortunately can't be here today, but as I said, she's happy to take questions. So if we do have any questions on transport, which I know you probably will, we'll write those down. And you can find a copy of her evidence, and it's not long, it's about 14 pages in that pack of information. So it's worth, if you're interested in the access issues, I'd highly recommend reading her evidence. She found that overall, and I quote, the transportation characteristics and accessibility of the site contribute to Waikanae East having a well-functioning environment. Harriet modelled the left out turn at the level rail crossing on Elizabeth Street, and she found that with the existing development plus the infill development, that includes the 39 new consented townhouses at Gus Evans's development, that it has 58% available capacity. It's at 58% capacity, so it's got an extra 42% available capacity. That's during the weekday morning peak hour. But within the next 10 years, Ms Fraser forecasts estimate that with new dwellings at the Waikanae East Greenfield area, somewhere between 50 to 143 new dwellings in that first 10 years, and a further up to 50 new infill dwellings in the wider Waikanae East area, that the crossing would be at between 74 and 96% capacity, thus requiring an additional capacity across the railway line. So in developing her model, Ms Fraser relied on Boffa-Miskell's intensification assessment, and that's what you can see up behind me. That actually is reproduced from the earlier work that Boffa-Miskell did, excuse me, which found that 40%, excuse me, which found that 40% of the realisable potential infill for the Waikanae town centre would be within the Waikanae East area. So she used the figures from that assessment and then the 40% of those figures to determine what the likely infill effects would be on the roading corridor. And then in developing her model, where had I got to? Sorry, and then she worked with Frank on a wider concept plan, which then identified a number of options for realising additional capacity across the railway line, which Frank will talk to. But to summarise these, Ms Fraser identified the following: an additional or replacement at-grade crossing to the north of the existing station, in a location where the crossing would not need to be closed as trains travel between Wellington and Waikanae. It would require a signalised intersection where crossings connect with the Old State Highway. And she would expect the left turn out of this crossing to have a weekday morning peak hour capacity of around 900 vehicles. Another option is a grade separated link provided under the railway, which would be most logically located to the south of the existing crossing as the ground levels start to fall towards the river. And in Ms Fraser's opinion, it would be the most efficient to connect directly to Te Moana Road at that point, with that option having the potential to increase the stop line capacity with separate turning lanes for each of the left turns onto the Old State Highway through to Te Moana Road and a right turn onto the Old State Highway towards the town centre. And she based on assumed potential arrival flows of 1,500 vehicles per hour from Waikanae East, a capacity of around 1,000 vehicles per hour would be achieved if she included cycle time being allocated to that traffic. A third option was a grade separated link provided over the railway line, and Ms Fraser considered that this would most likely occur towards the north and likely tie in with the roading associated with the ongoing development of Waikanae North. And in this location, it might be possible to provide a crossing that would not be constrained by adjacent intersections. Unlike the previous options described, an overpass with a single westbound lane across the railway that is not constrained by adjacent intersections could be expected to have capacity of around 1,500 vehicles per hour. So Frank will probably be able to speak to those in more detail. So I'm going to hand over to Frank now, and then afterwards I'm happy to take questions.
And sorry, Frank, you'll just have to press the button on your microphone on the right-hand side. Yeah, thank you.
And we're just about to get your next lot of plans up.
Well, while you're getting the plans up, good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for hearing us. Boffin-Miskell's been mentioned a few times, and I just clarify that I was with Boffin-Miskell for most of my working life, but in the past 12 years I retired, and I do still continue to consult, but not as Boffin-Miskell, so there is a separation. So don't think that I'm promoting something that Boffin-Miskell promoted when I was there. It's subsequent, even though I do believe they were right. So having cleared that, my brief really was to look at some spatial options as opposed to a structure plan per se. Really spatially, how would it look? How could it work? I've got two options which I'll quickly take you through. The first option really assumes a short to medium term period, and that's in next, say, 5 to 15 years. And then the longer term one, or plan 2, is really nominally from 15 to 30 years, where additional crossing, as Anna's alluded to, would be required across the railway line. I'll also talk about a third plan, which wasn't really part of my original brief, but we did it anyway because I think that it's really important that a lot of structure plans and things that we deal with today tend to deal with a site, albeit a big site, and somehow don't connect all the dots in the bigger picture. And so I thought in this particular case, it was important to show how Plan 1 and 2 should be seen really as a stage to a bigger picture which is not really in place, and it should be in place as a structure plan for the greater Waikanae area, if you like. So I'll speak to that also. So if we start off with Plan 1, and it's probably easier, you've got a copy in front of you, but I might point out a few things on this on the board here. The site we're looking at is in here, as has been pointed out by Anna previously. This is Elizabeth Street, this is the Old State Highway and Te Moana Road, and the Waikanae Town Centre is essentially up here. And here's the railway station. Now, all of you know the site, no doubt. It's a site you drive past and you don't really take too much notice of it. You see a bit of Goodman's activity there, and then there's trees, and it's all down at a different level. And in fact, most of that site is 5 to 10 metres below Elizabeth Street. And it's really integral to the Waikanae. In fact, the town of Waikanae hugs it, and it goes to the river. And you've got this, what I would refer to, and I don't mean it unkindly, a bit of an anomaly in here. It's industrial, it's rural, it's got a series of activities, and I believe it even has some reasonable soils. But nevertheless, in terms of an urban setting, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better site to embrace the township. It's got all the assets, it's got a railway, it's got everything. So it seemed like it had a lot going for it. Now, I won't go into the details. Anna's touched on some of the points about infrastructure that is near to the site and everything else. I'll just point out that this blue here, that's not the Waikanae River, and that is the floodplain of the Waikanae River as defined by the Wellington Regional Council. So the river really is just in this middle part here, this being the floodplain. Anna also referred to Goodman's have a water treatment plant over here, and the plan takes that into account and also expands it so that water treatment can be expanded in the area to make sure that any water that goes runoff and that goes into the Waikanae River is clean. We've also provided for open space in here, which is also can be part of a ponding area. We haven't done the maths on it, but it's pretty large, so that there would be suitable ponding areas. So some of those infrastructure matters have been considered, not in the finest detail, but we're reasonably comfortable there's fairly sufficient land there to accommodate those things. The plan shows intensive development here, as was envisaged in the 800-metre walking distance from the railway station, and this area up here we considered could be residential in the terms of standard residential, which in today's terms, because this plan was done 18 months ago, could conceivably be 2 to 3 stories or 2 to 3 units per lot, depending on lot size. So we've got residential here, and we've got a higher density here. Now there is a site at this purple. No, it's not purple. It's reddish, or salmon, or pink. It's industrial, and this is it's commercial, and this is industrial, the purple. And we have the Goodman's property in here. So the short-term plan envisages that Goodman's would stay in the short term, 10 to up to now to 15 years, if you like. But we've also looked at and talked to Goodman's that could they shrink in size and operate there in a more confined way to release a lot of the land in here for this development. So this is the Goodman site that's zoned industrial up in this insert, and it was suggested that this slither of land here, which really doesn't serve any meaningful purpose, it's so narrow, could be swapped for that in there, which is zoned rural, I think. I'm not sure now.
That's great, yeah.
And so that in effect, this would all become industrial, and that the balance of this then could be used for open space along here or for this development. So we've got a situation where as part of Plan 1, Goodman's would shrink and be confined to that. They would be serviced from Ann Street, just Goodman's, and that the development of the higher density residential would be serviced from Elizabeth Street. Now we've shown 2 nominal connections. They could vary. This one here almost lines up with Winara Street, and it could. It's just we didn't want to take the liberty. There's some properties there with houses on, but it could come in here. Another access point here, and another access point should this other development occur, the residential coming right up to here. So they would all go onto Elizabeth Street, and this Elizabeth Street crossing would remain in the short to medium term, up to 15 years. If you've noticed just up here, there's quite a stand of koe and other vegetation. There's quite a steep little escarpment there, probably about 10 metres high. We'd envisage that would remain with vegetation, and probably pedestrian access could be provided through here so that people, rather than going through Goodman's, which wouldn't be very nice for both Goodman's or the people, would probably provide for some pedestrian access so that these people here could walk through there and quite easily to the railway station, and that's within 800 metres. So that's the bones of that part of the scheme there, and there being the railway station. I'll go on to Plan 2 now, but I'm going to come back to this again in a minute. Plan 2 is essentially the same sort of layout here and here. Nothing really changes in this area except around here. As Harriet mentioned, the transportation person, that there may be a need for another crossing, and that might occur as it's been discussed before years ago. You could have a grade separated interchange to Te Moana Road. Maybe that's a little too hard to do now, I don't know, but it would be ideal in many respects. Or you could have an at-grade crossing here, and it could be light controlled. Whether or not this remained as an access would be a moot point. If, however, so you could have a crossing there which would leave that as Goodman's could stay there on a less developed site, or more likely they would see that they would probably need to move out in 10, 15 years' time, because the pressures of being in effect in the middle of a town centre area, a residential area, wouldn't be appropriate. So I've shown a plan up here, an insert, where that becomes residential. Now, whether that crossing occurs here as well as there is something that would be worked out in the short term. So there's an option with a connection to Te Moana Road. Now, I mentioned before about the bigger picture, and I think the bigger picture helps one decide as to whether Elizabeth Street, what happens to Elizabeth Street at this intersection with the Old State Highway. If this went ahead, or if something else went ahead, would that cause a rethink of how this might be arranged? So if I go to Plan 3, that's just gives you a bigger picture. It almost takes us right up to Peka Peka, and, oh, sorry. Now, can you get me back to that? Oh, there we go. So looking at this again, this is the 800-metre walking distance, which actually cuts through there. We're a little bit out of it there, but it depends how you measure 800 metres, whether you measure it along the street system or whether you come through rights of way that could be created to achieve this. It just seems to me that I've lived in Waikanae for 30 years, and it's not the easiest place to drive around, and finding road connections. They sort of stop and start, and what worries me is we don't want to end up with the same sort of thing here. We've got Waikanae East on this side of the railway track, and we've got Waikanae here, and we've got the expressway, and then we've got the beach area. And somehow or other, connections this way are not that easy. So it seemed to me, and I agree, that there should be another crossing somewhere up here, and I've just suggested up near where Waikanae, to the north of Waikanae North. And I was involved with Sam Pritchard here with the development of Manu Gardens. Once the Waikanae and Ryman's was developed, we looked at that there, and we looked at a connection through here and possibly through to Narara Road. Now, crossing a motorway is not the easiest, expressway is not the easiest thing once it's in, but there is conveniently an underpass here, so that if there was a connection from the state highway here, it could come through Manu Gardens, and it has a sufficiently wide road, and it could go under the underpass, and it would be on Narara Road, which in effect would take you down here, and you could hive off down to the exit, the on-ramps of the expressway if need be, if you lived in this part of Waikanae. And this part of Waikanae is going to grow. So that would be that. The other thing is Narara Road's probably a pretty important road. It finishes about here somewhere at the moment in terms of being formed, but there is a paper road that goes like that and comes back to the state highway. And council, in fact, well, I'll just backtrack a minute. Council on their district plan have a notional road that goes through there anyway. Strangely,
that goes out to Rutherford Drive as well, Frank.
That goes right through. But strangely, there's a wee gap in it just here, but I don't really understand that. But nevertheless, I think council has thought about possibly that connection. And I think council should probably think about a Narara Road connection too. And again, you wouldn't actually bring the road down here now where the paper road shows, because you'd have to cross the motorway. But what you could do, and unfortunately, is you could actually get a connection just from in here. Sorry, I can't really see this plan quite right. Up here, you could come around where the road crosses over. You could get a connection. I'll just have. No, it doesn't go high enough. I think I've got the wrong plan, do I?
No, that's what you're referring to there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to there.
It's on the ones we've got.
Oh, it's on the ones you've got. So if you look at the ones you've got, you had me worried there for a minute. where the paper road goes and then takes a right angle towards the motorway, the expressway, I've shown two red arrows, if you like. One of them hooks back to where the overpass goes over the expressway, when you're going up to Harrison's nursery and that sort of thing. Just over the motorway, you could actually make a left turn and hook into Narara Road, and I believe that land is owned by the Crown, namely Transit, or Kotahi. And you could get an at-grade connection there, so you can go under and over the expressway. So there could be the makings of a loop without another major on and off ramp system up there. It's already partially there. And the same applies with Hadfields Road. There's a nominal road, which I think is called, I can't even read it now. That comes off Hadfields Road, which Octavia Road, which could hook into the old state highway as one. So there's quite a few options up there, whereby you could get a better connectivity between Waikanae East and Waikanae proper. And I'm also mindful that since the time that I prepared this plan, there are fairly large subdivisions proposed on the north side of the paper road up near Pekapeka. And there's also north of Manu Gardens, there's another big development being looked at also. So it seems to me that all those developments and all those connections, rather than looking at the connections of each of these big developments separately, they need to be considered together, and the timing of them, so that we get a roading system where you can cross the old state highway in several places, if not 3 places. And you can hook in easily to Narara Road. And people who live up at the north end of Huia Street and that sort of thing wouldn't even come down to the south if they were going north. They would go north and get onto Narara Road, or go north if they're going north on the expressway and not come down to the on-ramp down here. So a lot could be determined and solved if one was to look at the bigger picture of the infrastructure, particularly the roading infrastructure, and how it might work and how it might influence some of these things. If we just look at the Elizabeth Street crossing in isolation and a crossing onto Te Moana Road and one up towards Manu Gardens in isolation, I don't think one gets the bigger picture of what the opportunities are or should be, because, you know, there's no way we're going to have overpasses or underpasses over the expressway now. But there already is an underpass, there already is an overpass, all it needs is connections to them. And the land that conveniently to the north, I understand it's owned by the Crown still, and near Ngāmanu, where they redid the entry to Ngāmanu Sanctuary, the Crown still owns some of that, which I think abuts with Manu Gardens. Then, you know, surely the Crowns could be party to this, and we could actually get a really good system. And bear in mind that these other developments are occurring too, which didn't occur when this plan was done. So somehow or another, council needs to really try and look at the big picture for Waikanae, and I think it would make a lot of sense, and you would see the relevance of what is suggested down here in what has to be, even though it's a greenfield site and it's not currently zoned residential, has got to be one of the best intensification sites you could get. And I know a problem that you're already encountering, or if you haven't, you're going to, is character areas and how this intensification is going to affect those areas. I would say you'd have very few neighbours who would be too concerned because it's out of view, it's on the south side, recreation opportunities that flow on from it, walking down the Waikanae River, walking to the railway station. I mean, it's got to be one of the best sites available. I think I've said enough, but there's a bit of work to be done, but if the longer we leave it, we're going to close out options.
Thank you, Frank.
I'll just add, so why are we here? What's the point of the meeting? We've had pretty good discussions with the council team, Jason Holland and Chris. The landowners spent a considerable amount of money preparing these plans and submitting into Plan Change 2. Missed out on that, unfortunately, but I think we all agree that there is an opportunity here that is going to be missed, and Frank probably undersells himself a bit as being retired. He's, I would say, world-renowned master planner. Done golf courses and housing developments all around the world, and we're lucky to have him in Waikanae, and he's still doing projects all around the country as well. So, you know, when you look at that zoomed out plan of all of Waikanae, you know, we need to make the most of the opportunity here. And I was saying before, Kapiti, we're in a sweet spot. You know, Wellington have got rates going up, they've got insurance rates going up. We've actually got our infrastructure sorted thanks to the good decisions of the council previous. We've got this opportunity to make a good decision here and have good growth. And we're not talking, you know, the next 1-2 year, we're talking 10, 15, 20 years. And we need to make those good decisions again now. But I think, yeah, we need your support, and we're happy to talk it through and, yeah, work with you. And I know a poor result would be ad hoc development, you know, some industrial, some lifestyle, some terraced housing. Like, if we could have that coordinated approach there, it's a win-win for everyone.
Thanks, Sam. And I guess we'd just like to bring you back full circle to our submission on the long-term plan, because that sort of puts it quite succinctly as to what the landowners are looking for, and which is a relationship going forward with council. And we've used the example that was done in Porirua for Porirua Northern Growth Area, where there was a memorandum of understanding that was entered into between landowners and council. And it set out the process which both parties could agree to, and that was an agreement which has worked out really successfully. So it keeps the process neutral. The Schedule 1 private plan change process sits outside of that, and that the decisions on that can be kept independent. But it just establishes what the roles are. So for both the parties, so the landowners can get some certainty going forward, and it also sets out what we would like to be able to see is a council agreeing to furthering work around that transportation feasibility study. So I'll wind up. If there's any other question, would any of the landowners like to speak? I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thank you, Frank, Anna, and Sam for the korero. And yeah, agreed. Thank you all for making time to come and listen into the conversation as well, all the landowners. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Cofield.
Oh, thanks, Frank, Anna, and Dr. Frank, Anna, and Sam. The zone, the area adjacent to the Waikanae River, that's going to be rural production and a ponding area and sort of landscaping there? Just the buffer between the
buffer.
residential and the river there.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Rob, you're referring to this area
Yes,
here.
yeah.
Yeah, I would see, well, there'll be a need for a ponding area probably, and that would be incorporated in this area.
I think the Friends of the Waikanae River would be pretty interested in that too, to landscape.
Well, I mean, there's a huge opportunity, you know, from the treatment plant here or even beyond that. The treatment plant's just off the picture here. You know, this all hooks right into the Waikanae walkways, and you've got the crossing here now. And so, plus you'd have the wastewater treatment here. Could be, you know, I mean, it's a wetland system. You've got that there. You develop this walkway through here, so really, you know, it brings all this as public open space, if you like, all through here.
So, Frank, you've given consideration to walkways, cycleways, and bridleways as well. You know, just in that
making provision
the
for them to
spatial
happen,
thing. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can get under the bridge here and get into the walkway on this side. You can get up, you can come up and cross over and get onto that side.
Sure.
And Otaki, Rob, how popular that
Fantastic.
walkway is on the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah. No, we're developing that district wide, and it's really popular. Yeah.
And if I could add, Rob, the Brett and Cheryl Percival, who's here today, they've entered into an agreement with council over there. They've just recently done a subdivision, which has resulted in rural lifestyle lots along the river and then a balanced lot for future residential. But they have entered into an agreement to provide a cycleway link up to Reikorangi Road and an Esplanade Reserve. So there is the start of that already.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And thanks, Frank, for your district-wide input into our planning. It's good to see a bit of spatial sort of outside the square stuff. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rob. Mayor Holborough.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, and thanks for your work on this opportunity for the district and for the landowners who are here. It certainly has great potential, and the site, as you say, with the challenges with character areas, certainly there are some advantages to considering development on this site that I can see straight away. I've got a couple of questions. The first is the extra railway crossings. Do you see them as essential for this to go ahead, or just beneficial? And the second question I've got around the railway crossings is that kind of just a cost issue or a council issue, or how do KiwiRail feel about having crossings in close proximity like that? How does that work? Do they both come down at once, or what happens? Because you wouldn't even have a whole train between them.
Well, in response to the first question, Harriet Fraser has modelled that without Waikanae East, the crossing will be at capacity after 10 years. So you need to do something to accommodate development and full development over Waikanae, the wider Waikanae East area, because the levels of service will drop. So what she's saying is that even without Waikanae's Greenfield area, we'll need something will need to be done. What she's recommending is that the actual current crossing, and I think Frank alluded to this, was that is actually relocated so that we don't end up with two level crossings. We'd either have a level crossing to the south or a level crossing to the north. But in the interim, there would be a crossing at where the existing crossing remains, and then possibly there could be an overpass that connects into Waikanae North, so that area where Ryman's is. So there would only ever be one
level crossing.
Level crossing, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I really like that you're looking at the wider picture with this roading network and the possibilities with the existing underpasses. It's just that kind of big scale, long-term thinking is exactly the kind of thing we need and which we don't do enough of. So thanks so much. It's wonderful to meet you finally. I've heard your name so much. I feel like I'm looking at the Wizard of Oz or something. This mythical figure who's in our midst. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
The timing is right. I mean, it would be nicer if it was earlier, but it's not too late. And there are developments coming online, as council full knows, some major developments off the picture there, up towards Peka Peka, that are solving a problem either onto Peka Peka Road or onto some other thing. And maybe, you know, there would always be some access there, but there seems to be, if you take all these inputs together and look at the big picture, then something has to be done. And the time to do it is now, at least plan for it now and do it when you need it. Otherwise we close out the options.
Yeah, definitely hear that note around the opportunity of this moment in time. And as the Mayor talked to, I think zooming out and being able to understand the interconnectedness of what is happening, what could happen, what we enable the potential for is quite exciting. So it's good to be starting this conversation. And yeah, Councillor Provanov, we've just got another 10 or so more minutes. So if anyone else has questions, put your light on now. Oh,
yeah. So thank
Councillor
you everyone for your presentation and obviously the work that's gone into this and for the landowners to come along today. So this is quite a detailed question, but given the Waikanae River corridor, I take it that private land goes closer to the river. Yes. So where the blue line is, that's not where the boundary of properties is.
No, that's the floodplain, if you like.
Oh, sorry, if you could just pop your microphone. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, the blue line is what is defined in the Greater Wellington Plan as the floodplain.
Right. Thank you. So
Part of that blue line would be recreation.
Esplanade Reserve or Esplanade.
Esplanade Reserve, yeah. And we've also got land inland, not inland, but upwater of that.
right. Okay. Thank you. Because I'm thinking about if something ever happens here about some of those CWB connections. And so thank you for talking about, I suppose the connectivity between east and west, and I suppose someone who lives in Waikanae, I know it can be quite tricky at times at present, and given population growth, it will change. It's interesting seeing the option, and I suppose given time, if something like this does occur, that will be an ongoing conversation. But one thing that I suppose that hasn't really been touched on, which is the effect on the rest of the community in terms of schooling and medical centres. So have you looked at what effect a large number of houses would have on Waikanae?
Actually, thanks, Jocelyn. That was I forgot to actually read the rest of my notes on that. They're actually Harriet's evidence. So in Harriet's view, Mrs. Fraser's view, that around, so she says, around the 10-year time frame, it makes sense to provide for the relocation of the existing crossing further north or further south. But she's considered other infrastructure interventions. So immediately we could be looking at things like working with the Ministry of Education to use school zoning and locations of primary schools to minimise the likelihood of children living on the opposite side of the railway line, for example. And right now we know that the Ministry of Education is actively looking for land. So, that's something that can be done right away. Minimising non-residential activity on the eastern side of the railway lines that doesn't serve the immediate needs of the residents, and improve bus services into and out of Waikanae East. Yeah, so she's considering that, in the immediate term up to that sort of 10-year timeframe, those are sort of the things that we can do. Beyond that, we're looking at definitely creating another crossing. So something
There's more central government policy settings as well for school and medical care. As the population grows up here, we obviously need it. They have that land at Waikato North Ministry of Education, which has sat there for, I don't know how long now, 10 years.
Probably longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Yep, through you, Madam Chair. Anna, great to see you. Look, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that you've brought all these parties together. Be made aware that you've done a lot of work in regards to that, and I do see this as a uniting opportunity and a point in time. I just wanted to let everyone know, don't be too phased if there's not a lot of questions coming, because this has already been through PC2 and the long-term plan. So from my end, I'm pretty comfortable with where this is at information-wise, and got previous notes and all this as well, that sort of stuff. But appreciate that high-level view, and the fact now that we're moving into rightio, those two processes have gone by. We're moving into a private plan change. What does that look like? Not if it looks like, what does it look like as we move forward, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make aware that the lack of questions is not a lack of interest as such.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So I don't actually have any questions, and I know there's a process moving forward around this. More interested in what that is as such.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Nigel, before we come to you, we've got Kim Tahiwi online from Ngahapu Ōtaki. Kim, apologies, I forgot to intro you when I was saying who was around the table. Didn't realise you were online, but over to you.
Bye. No, kia ora, Kim Tahiwi, and to be honest, just to be clear, I don't sit here for Te Atiawa, but my question does relate to Te Atiawa, recognising that this development is right by the awa, and that they did have some concerns as I read their statements, and I believe you engaged with them way back in March, and my question is about what engagement have you had since? Are you regularly engaging with them? Because I noticed in their statement that the spatial plans that they got were indicative only. It mentioned something along those lines, and they did have some concerns. So is there an ongoing relationship there?
Kia ora, Kim, and nice to meet you. We haven't carried on the conversations with Te Atiawa at this stage, simply because we are wanting to see where council sits going forward, but absolutely becomes part of the process in developing a private plan change, that consultation, and they would be actively involved in the further development of these structure plans, because as you've already identified, they're conceptual only at this stage. So taking it through to a plan change, we would be working really closely with Te Atiawa, and seeing what are the areas that they would be wanting to protect. We know, obviously, from having discussions with them and also working with them on other developments, that things around the existing issues that they have at the moment are really to do with the pressure on the awa from on-site wastewater disposal from rural subdivisions. So we don't have the infrastructure in place at the moment. So, for example, we're putting in pressured wastewater systems to service rural subdivisions, which is really unusual, but as a way of addressing Te Atiawa's concerns there. And obviously, the constructed wetland that Goodman's did was the design and development of that was done with Te Atiawa, and looking carefully at the discharge and the zone of reasonable mixing. So we're really aware of what the values are in the awa and that we're needing to protect.
Right. No, that was all my questions.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Kim. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Hi, thanks, Anna and Frank and everybody else. I've got a couple of questions. Do you have a mind about who the people would be buying these properties? So the demographic. So are you catering for young families, old retired people?
Like I said, I call it the Gold Coast. So many people. I've got friends moving up from Wellington. Lots of young families. We're traditionally a retirement base, especially in Waikanae. Frank's down the garden centre, probably Harrison's. But I think it caters for everyone, and being close to that transport hub as well, I think there would be good demand. You do have that stuff at Narara, the development down there as well, which is a little bit different, closer to the beach, but being close to the train station is a big benefit.
Okay. I just came back from lunch at Harrison, so it's a thing, Frank, don't worry. We're all good, mate. We're all good. Hey, so the next thing for me is, and Jocelyn raised this point about demographic, and I'm not picking on this, I really am not. I've done it to every developer that comes into the place, and that is what school are the kids going to go to, what doctors are the residents who move in going to go to, given that if you don't currently have a doctor in Waikanae, you cannot get one. You just can't. They turn you away. So, and it's the box that does get ticked at the moment, obviously, is public transport, and buses would meet demand. So I just wonder about that. And quite often what happens with developments is that the infrastructure comes after the development. And so all that does is just make life more difficult. So I'm just wondering, will you be directly talking to agencies, or would you just be thinking council's going to be talking to agencies?
I think that's the advantage of part of the opportunity. It's not, like I said, it's not next year. We're talking 5, 10, 15 years, so we have time to lobby central government. I agree. We've got pressure on skills in the health system. It's not just Kapiti, but as we do grow, there is pressure there. So I think, collectively, we do need to lobby government to make sure we get those services.
And just a comment I would make, and thank you, Frank. I think the big picture often gets missed. Given the proposal here and what Frank was saying about other developments, this is an absolutely ideal. You are providing us with the weaponry to go to central government and say, this is what is going to happen. It's not what's happened already. This is going to happen. We are going to need a school. We are going to need medical, etc., etc. So in that regard, this is incredibly helpful. A question I had was around, is any of the land subject to treaty claim that you're aware of? Because there is...
No, that's a good question, Nigel. No, none of it's all privately owned. There's no state-owned enterprises, Section 57 land, or so no. There is proposals. There's opportunities there for council to have esplanade reserves, but other than that, I'm very familiar with all of the land titles. So because I've been working a lot with all the landowners, so I'm not familiar with anything that would provide an impediment from that perspective.
Okay. And regards transport, Harriet Fraser's report, I take that on board, that at capacity it would mean one car going across the crossing every 2.3 seconds at capacity. So you can just imagine what that would be like when the train comes, or one of those not infrequent breakdowns that we have. So again, your proposal, along with others, I think, really helps us make the case for alternate crossing. NZTA did have an underpass. That was always part of the plan until the expressway came along. And then NZTA assured us that the main road in Waikanae would be a country lane. But we know it's not a country lane, and in fact capacity is at stretch now. So, and just the last thing I wanted to briefly mention was, Anna, during the LTP discussions, the issue of an MOU was raised, and I did respond at the time that I personally thought that there would be some difficulty with a consenting authority being part of an MOU. And so I'm just wondering, rather than an MOU, if there is some other basis by which you could be working together collaboratively to get the best outcomes for everybody. But I think an MOU is problematic from a consenting
I think we use that example because it's been rolled out successfully in Porirua on that northern growth area with Malcolm Gillies and the other landowners there. We're working with them on that, and that is a strategic piece of land for them in that northern gateway to Porirua. So it is proven, the MOU, but if there's other methods, we're happy to work with Jason and the team.
And also, Nigel, that's the MOU's been done by council's own lawyers, Simpson Grierson. So, and that's why I wanted to give a copy to you of that, because we checked with Gillies Group and PCC if that was all right to share. So I think it's an example that has worked, and it does create these separate delineations of the two processes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it from a broader philosophical point of view. I imagine that I would yield to the view of the planners inside council. They understand how operationally these things work, so I'd go along with that. Just finally, I'd just say these developments are happening. They are happening at pace, and thank you for going to the enormous extent that you've gone to, because it helps us in our long-term planning, which hasn't always happened. I did have one more question. Sorry, quick one, hopefully. And I know you guys have got a Kumbaya circle going here, which is wonderful. But what happens if somebody decides, no, I don't want to do this anymore? How does that, and if, say, they're strategically placed within it, what happens? Is it kind of, does everybody have to be in, or? I'm sure it'll all be wonderful, but just in case.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a reality that could happen. We, and I think this is the importance of trying to move forward now where we've got agreement with landowners, and utilise that agreement, because the landowners could change, both properties could sell, but they would have the opportunity to retain their occupation as they currently have. They don't have to subdivide it. So this is not we're not putting forward a subdivision application at this stage. All it is a rezoning. They would sit on that land as residential. So the cost to them would be the increase in rates. And I think that's, they're all aware of that.
I'll just add, the risk is, I notice these plans are done in March 23, so they're quite old, but landowners need to make a decision and move on. They've got businesses and other decisions to make.
Great, not seeing any further questions. And as Councillor Halliday says, I think, and you mentioned it yourself too, Anna, that this is hopefully just the start of a conversation which will continue, and it seems like there's willingness and energy to be involved in that conversation, and to continue it both at an operational level, which it sounds like you have a really good relationship with Jason and Chris and the team, but also with the councillors as well. So we will continue that conversation in some way, shape or form, and appreciate you making the time and having put in all the work, as Councillor Wilson mentioned, to bring to us what you have today, and that you've also submitted into a whole bunch of council processes before. But it's nice to have this opportunity to sit down and hear directly and help to understand what role we could play. So thank you so much for coming. Awesome.
Thanks.
That
We
concludes
appreciate
our
it.
briefing.